Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Toronto International Film Festival. My name is Andrea Picard, and I'm the lead programmer for Wavelengths. And it is really fantastic to see such a full house tonight. Some of you who have been following Wavelengths over the years have known that we've been in the cinema very rarely, but we relish the opportunity to do so. So it's really great to see all of you here tonight. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that tonight's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work with the community. We are also very grateful to Six-Pack Film for providing us with Arena, and we are also grateful to Nurik Niemschneider, you're going to correct me on that, James, for providing us with COHEN. And I think the last time Wavelengths presented films here, it was a film by Simon Liang and Margaret Honda. And Margaret Honda had presented a 70mm film, and we have another one, Arena, tonight. And this is one of the great features of the Bell Lightbox, is that we can show a film on this format, which is really grand. Now, these two films are very different. We hope they make a really nice pair. One's very much about space, and the other about time. And I'm going to bring both filmmakers up, but we've shown work by both of them before. Björn Kämmerer, we've shown a number of his shorts in Wavelengths, and he's very much an inventor in some ways, and his structural works are very precise, and so we're really happy to have this one. And James Benning, of course, needs no introduction. He's legendary, both in the film world and now the art world as well. And if there's anybody who's taught us so much about looking and listening, it's James Benning. So I'd like to welcome them both on stage. Sorry, I botched your gallery's name. My German's not so good.
Neuger Riemschneider.
I'm working on
it. I might say something about the film afterwards, but we shot that film last autumn on 65. It's shot in one take. And I think it makes more sense to talk about afterwards. So maybe it's interesting the way we made it.
I'll be brief too. Mine is one take also, so you're going to see two takes tonight. To alleviate your anxiety, I'll just say a few things. That first, it seems like nothing is happening, but actually a lot is happening, but it's hard to perceive that. And then something very spectacular happens, and then something rather mysterious happens, and then something surprising happens that you probably were anticipating. So we can talk about that. We'll both be back. Thank you.
Thanks. Enjoy the screening. So Björn, I'm going to start with you. You shot on 65mm.
Yes.
And I saw you right before you were going to shoot this film, and you were a little bit nervous.
Yes.
For many reasons. Can you tell us how the film was made and how you conceived of it?
I actually like, for example, when I made Navigator, I filmed an object which was supposed to navigate, but then it was something completely different in the cinema. And here I called it Arena because it's not an arena. So what we shot was it's like a revolving auditorium in Czech Republic. So while the auditorium is moving, we are also moving backwards with the dolly. So we have like two axes permanently moving. And so the idea was to pretend a pan, which you like, I mean, you can't really figure out what we do, even if I talk about it, I guess. What we did.
Do you not want to demystify?
Yeah, but I mean, so that's the technical part. But I mean, what I was trying to do was that I kind of, or like, I repeat objects, but there was like I also wanted to have the look on this little details. I don't know if you see, but it's like you have the chewing gums and stuff like that, and to that at some point in the film that you kind of forget of what you're looking at, that it changes to an abstract pattern somehow. Yeah, and another technical thing is that we have so like to pretend that it's a pan was also the weather situation. So it had to be a softbox because we shot outside. Otherwise, you would see what we have done. And we shot the film actually on high speed, on 100 frames per second, which is pretty wild, on 65. Yeah. Any questions?
We don't have microphones for the audience, so if you do have a question, please speak up. Is there, yes, right here?
I had the exact reaction that you described, or I guess this was intended where at the start, I was like hyper-focusing on like, oh, the numbers between the rows, and that seat's red, and I think that's a stuff mark there, and it all kinds of blended together. My question is, did you film an entire 360 of rotating both axes and then decide on that particular segment with this, there was few variations with the red chair and stuff, or like what was the decision on your part as to which 5 minutes to excise?
I mean, you're pretty limited. You have like you can shoot 8 minutes on, like if you shoot one take on 65. And it's, I mean, I wasn't. You can't shoot 360 degrees because it's just like one. It looks like this cinema, so this it's not round in a way. So if it would rotate 360 degrees, you wouldn't see any seats anymore. Like there's no, the auditorium is just on one side. So yeah, that was pretty clear from the beginning. I mean, I had to. I always, when I shoot, I leave things like I drag people into that project, but then I decide pretty much on the set what we're doing. So there was this object, and we had the camera and some film stock, and then I had some ideas, but then we figure out while we're doing it, and then it's like the weekend we shot it was pretty wild because it was like a storm. We had to remove trees from the streets when we went there. And so I didn't really want any leaves. It was an autumn, so we didn't want any leaves with 100 frames per second in the image, of course. So it was also hard to find the right moment to shoot it. And yeah.
Yes, over here.
I mean, I got support by some people, made some friends with Ari in Munich. And I mean, the labs now, it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy, but it's not that hard. If you do something like that, it's like you get people supporting you because it's pretty unusual. But it's also then at some point very tough. Like makes you nervous and something. Handing over that negative stock to some dudes.
How many prints do you have?
I know. I mean, I have like 7 prints, I think. So it's quite a lot. But it was hard to like find the right timing with colors and stuff like that. So yeah.
Any final questions for Björn? Yes? What came first, the idea or the location?
Yeah, I mean, I was scouting for something like that because I heard about it, and there was like one in Czech Republic, which is pretty close to where I live, and another one in Finland, which is pretty far. So I contacted them, and then it was hard to really like find a date for shooting there, and then I kind of forgot about it because I never really write down things. And 1 year later, it appeared that I was going to shoot a film there, so I contacted them again, and then all of a sudden it was possible, and then we got the camera and we just went there for a weekend and shot that film, which is like, I didn't really know, because like, it would have been like rain or something, or sun.
I think it turned out really well.
It looked nice. No complaints.
Thank you so much, and
Thank
for
you.
bringing the print. Thank you. You found a nice TIFF seat there, James.
Yes.
Please welcome back James Benning.
Hello.
I want to ask a sort of similar question, the idea or the location. This is a very specific composition that we see here in a farmland in Oregon. So why did you choose that particular place?
Well, what you're watching is this is on? You hear me? Yeah, okay. Is a document of full eclipse of the sun that I shot last August. And so I knew the eclipse was going to happen at a particular time on a particular day. And were very good maps on the internet where you could find the exact center point as it crossed the U.S. And I chose a farmland in Oregon, and I found the exact center of the eclipse as it was happening. I got there 3 days early, and so I scouted until I found a place that would be rather not spectacular, but it would give me a z-axis so that you would see something in the background and the telephone poles. And then when I scouted it, there were actually cows in the field, and I was interested to see what cows would do, but they moved over to the pasture next to me, which I kind of like because now you hear them off screen rather than seeing them. So none of it is, there's no digital manipulation, and the soundtrack is the actual soundtrack that was happening. It's airplanes were in the air, flying and dropping skydivers, and some were just up there to see the eclipse from the air. So they were continually circling, and I didn't expect that either. So it was a nice fortuitous event that led to, I think, a rather mysterious soundtrack that happens. And the people screaming are from a campground that's half a mile from where I was, probably.
And of course, I have to ask about the Leonard Cohen song, why you chose that song, why Leonard Cohen?
Well, when I experienced the full eclipse, it's kind of, I don't want to use a swear word, but it does that to you. And so I was very confused because the whole idea of time, really, you experience a night in 2 minutes and a sunrise in 3 seconds and a sunset in 3 seconds, or the other way around. And so it made me think a lot about it as being a metaphor for life itself, how quickly it passes by. And Leonard had died the November before, I believe, and I kind of thought of him when I had these feelings, and it seemed like something to do. And when I did it, I felt uneasy about it because it seemed so corny. But people cry from it. So.
It's tremendously moving, I think. Are there questions?
And I like Leonard Cohen very much. As a young poet and as a folk singer and entertainer.
I think many of us feel the same way. Questions for James? Yep.
The yellow gas can, was that in the location, or did you just put that there because you thought it worked on the show?
Next question. Yes, I did put that there. I didn't bring it, but it was off frame a little bit, and I thought, oh, a little yellow would look good there.
It's a good composition. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know it was in the shot until I looked at it later. I never saw him. I did hear it though, because they kind of go as they go past you. So that was a nice coincidence. What happens with a full eclipse of the moon? You get partial eclipse first. So there's actually two shadows that are moving across the landscape. There's a larger shadow that takes 2 hours to pass. And then in the inner core is the full eclipse shadow, which passes in 2 minutes, 2 minutes and 2 seconds where I was. And it's moving at across the US in an hour and a half. So it was moving at 2,000 miles an hour, the shadow. And the inner shadow, even though it isn't a hard shadow, because it's moving so quickly, you have this day to night time that goes in like about 4 seconds, and then night back to day in 4 seconds. And that's due to when the full eclipse shadow passes through. And I started filming at 21 minutes before the full eclipse happened, which meant I was about halfway through the partial eclipse. So those 21 minutes, when I said very little seems to be happening, but a lot is happening, the amount of light change is 8 stops, so it's 1/2 to the 8th power, which means there was 500 times more light at the beginning of the shot until the time that the inner shadow comes. And then when the inner shadow comes, it drops another 10 stops. And of course, I had to do a kind of little trick there. I had to pull the filter out because it would have just been black otherwise. So when I pulled the filter out, and then I had to replace it when this light came back. And I didn't know really what I was doing and exactly what moment I should do that at. But I did it quickly enough that it only destroyed like 4 frames. So I had to cut those 4 frames out. But I wanted to keep the time consistent, so I filled them in with 4 frames nearby, so you don't notice that the filter went in and out. So once I take the filter out, my lens is on automatic exposure, so it was actually all the way open, and it would stay open, but the filter's there, so I got so much more light because of that. So there's 2 little tricks in it, but otherwise it's an exact document. And the tricks that I use only makes it look more like it looked like than it's not a trick to fool you, it's a trick to make it look like what I experienced. And when I watched that first 21 minutes, your eye does the same thing as my automatic exposure of the camera was opening up, but your eye opens up too. So you don't really notice that there's 500 times less light after 21 minutes, but you feel the quality of the light that's changed over those 21 minutes. And I think the camera or the film kind of records that too, that the quality of light changes tremendously in those first 21 minutes. And then one other thing you should know is all of Western California was on fire at that time, and there was a forest fire that's off screen to this side. So there was a haze that went across the screen from left to right, and due to this forest fire. And when the eclipse comes through, it actually brings a wind with it because the temperature drops 20 degrees. And so there was actually a little wind at that time, which we didn't see because it's dark. Otherwise, you would have seen the grass moving. And there was no wind that day at all, except for when that happened. But when it gets light again, that wind has blown the smog or the fog or the fire smoke away. And it's clearer. I don't know if you you notice that or not, but if you watch the film again, when it gets bright again, at first it's very clear, you see the mountain very clearly. And then by the end of the film, that smoke has drifted back and it's kind of in the space. So there's a lot of these really small changes that are happening throughout the film that were, again, fortuitous that there was a fire there, and not fortuitous that the wind came, because I knew that was going to happen.
We have time for one more question, if there is. Yes, right here. I think the only movement that you see is at one point there's 3 birds that cross the frame way in the background, and then there's a bird that flies in and sits on the telephone pole, and he stays there, or she stays there through the whole eclipse and never leaves the frame. It's just kind of, I guess, as stunned as I am of what happened. But that's the only movement I know of. But there may be others. Yeah. I'm afraid we're out of time, but this was a really fantastic screening. And thank you so much, James, for being here.
Thank you.
And Bjorn. Thank you.